In the last topic, we looked at how the economy can swing between booms and busts over periods of time. Now we're going to have a look at how the government gets involved in the economy to smoothen these cycles and to meet certain economic objectives. A major tool that the government uses for economic management is fiscal policy, which refers to how the government raises money through taxes and how it then spends this money back on certain areas of the economy. As citizens, we all get a flavour of the government's fiscal policy from the government budget, which is normally released around May or June each year, and outlines all of the changes to tax rates and where government spending is going. Citizens often assess the budget to judge how competent their government is. So firstly, let's look at how the tax system is important. As mentioned in other topics, the government has to find an income before it can spend it. And it has to decide how much it is going to tax people and businesses. For this topic, we'll assume banks and businesses are the same. If the government taxes people too much, then what you have is the situation where people have limited disposable savings. This will in turn reduce spending and consumption and therefore put a strain on economic growth. If the government taxes businesses too much, it means that entrepreneurs are less incentivized to start up new businesses because it's more expensive to do so. It might mean that large companies increase the prices of their goods and services or move some of their operations overseas to avoid paying high tax, which again constrains economic growth. So the message here is that the government, as a first step in fiscal policy, has to get the balance right between taxing people and businesses to promote positive economic growth. When economic times are tough, the government will tend to increase its overall spending in areas across the economy to keep it afloat. For example, it might start investing in infrastructure projects like roads and transport to help ensure that the working population can remain employed. If the government does not do this, then it's likely that the numbers of unemployed people will increase. More people unemployed in the economy is not a good thing because it means the total population has less disposable income, which means less spending, and this can perpetuate a cycle of negative growth. The biggest fear that most governments have around the economy is where the system sinks into a depression, which was seen around the world in the 1930s. An economic depression is basically a severe and prolonged downturn where it's likely to see high unemployment rates, and in some cases, basic essentials like food become difficult to afford for the middle classes. This can have devastating social and personal impacts. To avoid a depression, the government will usually restructure its tax rates, often imposing high rates on those who can afford it, like wealthy people and large companies. Another popular one is to increase taxes on goods like cigarettes and petrol because people tend to buy them irrespective of their prices. It may also increase its use of credit to fund higher expenditures. By spending more than what it earns, the government will create budget deficits, a term that you might hear thrown around the news. The assumption is, though, that the government will at some point have to cut back spending in the future to repay any accumulated credit, and essentially deleverage, just like people do if they've borrowed too much. So once an economic recovery is in sight, the government's goal will then be to try and return the budget to a surplus. This can be difficult for certain areas of the economy, like the middle classes, because it may mean less spending on things like public education and public hospitals. Hopefully this has been helpful to show you how the government will use tax rate structures and move between deficits and surpluses to help stabilize fluctuations in the economic growth cycles.